Let's start today with a question. If you guys can drop in the comments, and I might ask this more than once because I'm starting this off with this question, but how many hours have you been outside so far this week? It's Wednesday. Have you spent any significant time outside this week? Because that's going to determine the relationship that you have with the external environment outside of our homes. And the reason why this matters is because countries where they have great relationships with outside take care of the external environment. Someone's asking right now, what is my why? That's a really deep question 3 seconds into this. So my why is, I didn't even say what my what was, but the why, I'll start with the why, is because I would like to live in a reality where humans have the full capacity of self to transform reality, because I would like to be living in everybody's dream world as opposed to their nightmares. So I spend my life force energy empowering humans to recognize their creator ability, both from the inside environment of the self and then expanding that into a grander sense of self. So there really is no exterior. It's us recognizing that our self goes from this concept that is interior, like skin in is me, and we start to expand it out. First, we start to feel our energy, our energetic body, our aura that's extending beyond the skin in physical self, and we actually start to realize and recognize our connection to everything else that is self, because the illusion of the barrier of self, which is the skin, is but an illusion. We cannot exist with the things inside ourself, which is why we feel that everything from skin in is ourself, because we can't really exist without our blood or our brain or our organs. So we think that this is me. However, look at everything outside of ourselves: the air, the water, the light, even the experiences that we have, that we inhabit in this environment. This is all self as well. Next question: what is your favorite way to breathe, to relax? This is very simple. A lot of times there's breath works that are, let's call it offensive, where we are doing a breath work, which for some people can be more work. It can increase anxiety because now you're wondering if you're doing it correctly. So the favorite way to breathe, to relax, so this is kind of a two-step thing, is first to notice your breath. So you become the observer of the breath. And that's a really relaxed position where we just sit back and observe the breath. The second step of that is to observe how the breath is having impact on you. And when you're observing how the breath is having impact on you, then you can see the relationship that the breath is having within self. You're seeing the relationship between skin in physical body and this breath, which is something that we're all sharing. Within the air are the components that we need, like oxygen and nitrogen. And there's also prana that is said to be within the air. So the breath is one way that we can bring in this life force energy. Once we have the capacity to recognize that the breath is in relationship to self, when we actually do go into breathwork practices where we are holding our breath or speeding up our breath, we can also have that observation of how we're breathing, but now we're actually consciously controlling it. But the more important part was that second step, where we're in relationship to how that change of breath pattern is impacting our self. Through this build of relationship, we can see how our environment of the internal self changes with our breath pattern. And as we build that relationship, we can recognize patterns within self based on the breath patterns. So it's all about pattern recognition. That's how we actually sense our power. Eventually, you may recognize patterns being transmitted or enforced or reflected out into reality. And it all begins with awareness of self. So back to the original question, what is my why? My why is to help us increase our awareness of self and then expand our awareness of self out into all things. And when we all have an awareness of self that is everything, when we step into and voluntarily grasp onto our creator abilities, then we all start to harmonize this reality to our intentions, to our greatest desires. Okay, now people are answering my questions. Tons of time outside, probably less than an hour in total. We are outside all the time, yes. I don't know if that was a statement, but it's actually kind of true, because even our homes are a natural component of the human ingenious and creation. Like, we build our houses like a spider builds a spider web. So technically this is all nature at a certain level. I have a love affair with sunshine, says Christy. Can you drink some pee for us? I actually just went, but it's actually not that big of a deal, guys. It's just like drinking water. It's the same effort. So you guys all know what drinking pee looks like. Just drink a glass of water and it'll be the same exact thing. Any techniques to reduce wrist pain? Move your wrist, but I'll give you some. Not knowing anything about you. So start with this. And actually, if this is painful, then you can just start by rubbing back and forth. And then eventually, da, 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 da. And you actually kind of want to make some impact in there when you do that. And then you can do each finger, and you might be wondering, why am I moving my fingers? What do the fingers have to do with the wrist? This is all energy that might be blocked. So now you're scooping each finger, scooping the little finger, the middle finger, even the thumb. And then you can just slowly bend them all backwards. So we went down to, so this isn't just moving our finger. We're actually trying to increase range of motion. So we're taking our finger as far as we can with our own movement, down, around, and up. And we can even do it, fingers splayed. So we can even do it by actively keeping our other fingers up to increase that range of motion. So we keep our other fingers up, and you see, as we move our finger, it's a little bit of a struggle. So that's another thing we can do. What else can we do? We can just massage in through points, just like if you guys are doing maneuvers where you take the tongue and you push it out in the cheek. It's not necessarily for just the cheek, right? It's connected to the entire meridian system. So you can find pressure points in your hands, and then of course wrist circles, and then you can do breath patterns like so it's inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. And you can focus on moving the wrists or your shoulders. Another thing which is really good is trying to move so you can see my whole body. So inhale, inhale, exhale. Inhale as you open, grab. Exhale as you close, and really bring that wrist in. I can keep on going on these. So I'll keep on going, all right? So then another thing is you can get into, see if I can adjust this a little bit. How can I get so you can see the ground? Up. Oh no, that's not the right one. I'm gonna go over some exercises that you can do. I'm gonna get on the ground here. Can you see? You can, yes. Got the shirt I was changing into. All right, so you can start on your knees, and this is to strengthen your wrist. So a lot of times we have injuries not because we're tight, but because we're weak. So this is actually from handstands. This is a handstand technique. So when you're doing handstands, what is going to stop you from your feet falling behind you would be if you can press into the ground. Just like your feet press into the ground to stop me from going this way, I would push my feet into the ground. And then in order to stop myself from going this way, I would push my heels into the ground. And so when you're working on handstands, you're going to be strengthening. This is basically the ankle of your foot, but in your hand. And so being able to press down like this helps your handstand abilities. Now, a lot of times we're grabbing too much. We're grasping too much. And the range of motion of our strength in our hands and our wrists and our forearms get really tight. We only know how to do things from this range of motion. So imagine now we're in a handstand in this range of motion, and we're not going to be doing handstands, just FYI. But being able to use those same muscles from this maximal range of motion as opposed to probably like grabbing groceries from here, if this is all of our range of motion, we're going to have some pain because the body's going to be really tight and weak. So we can strengthen the totality of these muscles right here, which is going to make them more mobile and stronger. So an easy way to do that is to first start on your knees, and you can hopefully you guys can see this. And there's 20 different talking points I can give here, but I'm just going to give you an easy one. Or I'm just going to go over the basics. Just lift up onto your fingertips and then slowly lower down. And the stronger you get, the more you can bring your knees back and then eventually go onto your toes, which I'm actually not in condition to do because I haven't been practicing those. But it's actually amazing how much weaker I am that I haven't done those in many, many years. So that would be a little bit about what I would do for wrist pain. Is you got to use your wrist. So a lot of times when you go to the modern DOCTOR, they tell you to stop doing things, when the answer is to keep on doing things. If you don't use it, you lose it. Yes, I try to be outside and go for hikes and be in nature as much as possible after work. So just like the breath technique of observing the breath, and guys, I'm going to be way behind on comments because you guys are leaving so much. So thank you so much for leaving comments, because now this is a co-creation. So another thing that you guys can do when you go outside is, instead of actively doing something like going on a hike, which has a destination, which is where you're fixated on, right? Whether it's to see something or just finish the hike or get your steps in. Another thing you can do is go out into nature and forest bathe. And you guys can look up forest bathing. There's many, many, many different exercises that you can do when you forest bathe. But forest bathing isn't hiking. It's an alternative, more present, should I say technique? I'll say technique. Technique that you can do while being outside. So look up forest bathing. It's completely different than hiking. It allows you to be completely immersed in, quote, nature. You essentially become nature. You realize that we are one with nature. There's a lot more that you can also do with your hands. Remember that breath one where I was doing that out? So that would be the opposite strength of this, would be that. After a few seconds of that, you're going to realize how weak and unable you are to spread open your hands. So spreading open the hands. You know, we don't wear mittens all the time like we wear shoes, but you guys see how messed up our shoes are, or our feet are. Our hands are pretty messed up as well because we don't use them. So even though they're not encased in something like our feet are, we're still just not using our hands. Do you run, or are you a part of any men's groups? No and no. I used to host men's groups, and I used to be essentially like a pro athlete, and running was like a very minimal part of that, meaning that I could easily run. I could join 5K races and be first in my age group without training for them, because I wasn't just running in my training. I was running with weights. I was one of, I don't want to keep on going into that. But yes, I used to run a lot in my life. I haven't been doing much of anything recently. Can you have parasites living in your brain, and what would be some of the symptoms to confirm this? I'm not going to act like an expert on this, but I would say that there are parasites as a part of any healthy environment. Meaning that we are hosting a lot of organisms within the body. What we know of as parasites would be an unhealthy balance of the different organisms within us. And by unhealthy, I mean it's no longer beneficial for us to host these individuals. And a lot of times that overgrowth can be because of weakness in other mechanisms that are supposed to counterbalance them. And also you could have had exposure to some parasites through lifestyle and or travel. That may be overrunning your system. I don't have much more of an answer than that to say that yes, you can have parasites in the brain. How you treat pelvic floor dysfunction. My posture is horrible and I'm unable to build muscle. Unable to build muscle. Building muscle is something. So imagine the best time imagine somebody who has lots of energy to dedicate to building muscle. Someone like myself. And imagine that I was doing everything in my power. I was eating like 16 times a day. Not really, but like 8 times a day. I was spending at least 3 hours in a gym. And I still wasn't able to build muscle when I was 17, 18 years old. But through persistency of making that my life, I ended up actually owning gyms. I was able to build muscle, 20, 30 pounds of muscle onto a frame that probably would have been 145 pounds. Well, I know I was 145 pounds at 19 years old. somewhere around 22 to 25, I was to like 35 when I was competing. I was ranging between 175 to 185. I almost got up to 190 at one point. So that's like 30 to 40 pounds of muscle. It's difficult. It's a lot of work. And now if I go to the gym for a few weeks, I can gain 5 pounds of muscle easily because I've done that work before. My body loses that muscle, but it can gain it back really easily. Muscle growth is more about training style and also nerve activation. And as we know, fascia, because fascia is what's also carrying the electricity through the body. So if you have impingements in the fascial environment of the body, meaning you have mobility issues, if you don't have an ability to express movement and those muscles are entrapped in tight fascia, then the muscle's not going to grow. If you have a full expression of movement and healthy fascia that can move pressure through your system, then if you're doing correct exercise that matches hypertrophy, which means muscle growth, then you can have muscle. But also, the mindset is the main thing as well. You guys can literally grow your body by identifying or intending on being in a different situation. And this has been proven not just with muscle, like women who want bigger boobs, imagine themselves with bigger boobs and live it. People that have been paralyzed and the doctors say there's no way you're going to do XYZ again, have willed their way back to a functional body. Because we also control things like hormones, and we control things like hormones and peptides, and where the body sends the energy through the fascia, we can control that with our consciousness. And all of those things have a lot to do with muscle growth. And so us intending for the body that we desire is first, and then we match it through action. But if we're doing the action, but our mind is identifying as, whatever it is, person without muscle, person with ugly features, if we're identifying as that, then the body system is going to be handicapped and not fulfilling its duties as a functional human. It's almost like we're mentally sterilizing our bodies. Sterilizing the right word? I'm saying sterilizing not in cleanliness, but almost like, because I was thinking of a seedless watermelon. Doesn't have, there's no intention to procreate, so it's not going to have the fullness of energy in it than a seeded watermelon, because it's been sterilized, neutered, whatever it is. But we can do that with our own body. If we think about our body poorly, the body's not going to be in an environment. Back to hormones. It's the hormones that get produced that actually are going to make the most muscle, right? That's why people inject things into the body, because it's either making shift in the hormones or it's giving them exogenous hormones from like horses, like testosterone from bulls. And so the hormone shift, which is illegal performance enhancing drugs, but you guys can make those hormone shifts internally. How you ask? Guys, start thinking about sex, or start thinking about being in a fight, or start thinking about something that triggers you. You're going to feel a flood of hormones. That is making physiological changes in your body. And so back to, how does this react? How does this integrate with muscle growth? Do the math. If we're continuously feeding ourselves cortisol because we're anxious, you know what cortisol does? Cortisol takes muscle, converts it to belly fat, converts it to long-term energy, because muscle is expensive, costs a lot of calories, and it's heavy. And so if we're an animal that is in a situation that we're afraid of, we actually don't need muscle. We need longer term energy because we don't know when the next time we're going to eat. And the body's not necessarily prioritizing power in the moment. However, if we do things, so anxiety is associated with cortisol. If we do things that are challenging and we think about ourselves on a mission and we're overcoming obstacles, whether they're mental or actually physical, the body is going to produce testosterone. If we view ourselves as a winner and there's all these other people around us chasing us, these are just mindsets, okay? These are mindsets that we can choose. We can choose victim mindset, which is going to flood our body with cortisol. Or we can choose champion mindset, who's constantly improving himself or herself or itself. And that mindset is going to have a different hormonal profile that's going to make your body actually look and behave and feel better. It's amazing. Okay, what can you suggest for hip opening for someone who is really stiff, can't bring knees towards chest, cross leg? It's a struggle. I can't sit crisscross, nor open my legs more than maybe 50 centimeters. Fascial maneuvers and the full set. Humangarage.net, do the full set. Because when you get to the end and you're doing these motions and you do this consistently, you're going to be able to start feeling your hips and your knees, for those of you asking about knees, and your shoulders. And you're going to start feeling the integration. You're going to start doing things with your legs and feel your shoulders opening up. Any tips on releasing hip flexor and pelvic tension? So this is a really easy one. See if you guys, when you walk, so when you walk, there's different ways to walk. We can walk by lifting. This is the hip flexor, right? The front. We can walk by lifting and setting down. That's one way to walk. And if we're not really paying attention, that's usually how we're doing it. Because we're sitting down in this flex position all the time, it's a little bit easier for us to just let those hip flexors automatically come back. The other way to walk, let's say we're in this position. If we squeeze our butt or move, what that's going to do is going to flex this part. It's going to extend our hip. And when we extend our hip, it moves forward. So when we walk, we would be extending. Now we're on the other side. And we extend. And now we're on the other side. And we extend. So the walk is going to be butt squeeze, butt squeeze, butt squeeze, butt squeeze. So it's like my right butt squeezing, my left butt squeezing, my right butt squeezing, my left butt squeezing, my right butt squeezing. And it's really not necessarily just squeeze it to move your hip forward, but it'll work in the beginning. You realize that you can literally just be going squeeze, 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 squeeze. And you're going to just walk naturally from doing that, as opposed to mindlessly walking by lifting your leg up, flexing your hip, dropping your foot down. Eventually, you can still add that, but you might even want to move your hips to activate more And it's not so much just your butt, but you want to practice with your butt. And I'm screaming as I go back. I hope you guys can hear this. You want to practice with your butt because most of the time it's not active. And when you do that, you're moving your hips in this position so that they're not so much in this position. And eventually it's not so much a butt squeeze as it is you sending the line of action from here down into your leg, into your balanced foot, the full foot. And your foot has this arch. If this is the heel bone, and then it has this arch, and then there's actually an arch in the front too. In the front. And so you can start feeling all of that. That would be where I would start, is just moving the walking position into the posterior part of your body, and start, when you're even standing or exercising, start feeling the tailbone as opposed to this going down, and then your full leg coming out of your hips, the full leg. Like, imagine all the tissue around it, and we're really locking into the focus and awareness of the fascia, and you're sending that down, like from your pelvic floor, your hip, and which really starts here, all the way down, and you'll feel it coming all the way up as well. Nice questions. Parasites are there to help us get rid of toxicity in our bodies. If we are not toxic, we won't have parasites. Terrain theory. That was somebody else's response to what we were talking about earlier. Do you have any exercises for chronic tendonitis in shoulders? Not so much, especially if I don't know exactly what your issue is. If we release the fascia, we will have much more space to grow muscle. I wasn't building that much muscle due to stress and fascial restrictions. Stress, yes. These are deep subjects, right? I'm just trying to give, what about smaller boobs? I already covered that. These are deep subjects. I'm just trying to give another perspective, because the more perspectives we have, the more we can triangulate to a truth that works for us. Hydrate your body with silica and minerals, then release the fascia globally in your body. Try the lower reset and stress reset. And most likely you will have a lot of torque fascia in your organs. Do the belly button, untorque, release, stress reset, organ reset. These are, everyone knows, right? HumanGarage.net for these fascial maneuvers. They're free. Or just go to their YouTube. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day. Talk to you in person this past Saturday. Love hearing you share your knowledge. I need to have other people's emotions released from me. So this is what you do. Number one, be open for it. And then two, imagine a toroidal shape. Toroid. T-O-R-O-I-D. If you're unsure of that, Google toroidal shape. You're going to see it looks like a donut with the energy that spins in the middle and comes all around the outside. Comes around the outside in a vortex, and it goes back in through the middle. So it's spinning around. And you want to imagine this shape. And I was talking to Christopher Witecki, and he was saying that this shape actually goes into other dimensions. And so trust and know that this shape is what we are. The toroid is our energetic field. This is what extends out from our heart and interacts with the environment. And so you are going to re-strengthen your toroidal field. And that's going to take the weakness that may have let in another's energy, and you're going to essentially reharmonize yourself and strengthen this field to your energy. And just run it through. Just imagine it. How much of it can you imagine? And this imagination's important, guys. We know how to move our body, but how many of us can imagine an apple? Like, can you see the apple? What color is the skin? Are there imperfections on the skin? What does the stem look like? If we cut into the apple, can we clearly see that in our imagination? Where do you think this picture is happening? In the same place that we create everything else that I talked about. Our internal environment, our hormones, what nervous system we're in. Are we in rest, digest? Are we in fight or flight? The brainwave frequencies, this is all being determined in the image place, the place of images, otherwise known as, that translates into place. Another word for place is nation. So that translates into imagination. And so our ability to practice and actually utilize our imagination is directly correlative to our ability to do things like what we know of as manifestation. And a lot of us haven't practiced imagination because we think it's silly. But go back to that apple. Can you do that with your eyes open? Right now I'm imagining an apple and I can see it clearly. Can you imagine and be in that imagination space at the same time that you're also viewing physical reality? Because if you can, now you're able to see another dimension. We know length, width, depth. So what else are we imagining? We're imagining an energetic environment. And as long as we can actually take that as reality, we can start to have impact in our internal environment, which is then extending out and reflecting out into our external environment. And we will stop ourselves from being impacted from other people. So there's a study by the HeartMath Institute where they looked into an apartment building and they hooked everybody up to machines, and they could see that people in apartments above, on the sides, below, were all impacting each other. So their emotional states, their brainwave frequencies, their mental states were all impacting each other. People were being and are being in every single apartment building influenced by the people in the apartments around them. And so then they asked the question, well, who's doing the most influencing? That's important, right? Out of all these people that are influencing each other, who are the ones that are the most powerful? And what they found is the most powerful people have the strongest alignment. Now, we're talking about HeartMath Institute. So they're doing a lot of work on the heart brain. They also discovered and did a paper, I'm sure it wasn't a discovery, it was a rediscovery, that there's neurons in the heart, 40,000 of them. So the heart is actually a brain. There's 100 million neurons in the gut, if my memory serves me properly, which I think it does, because it's 1% of the brain, which has about 86 to 100 billion neurons in the brain. So there's 40,000 in the heart, and there's 100 million in the gut. These brains, all being in alignment, back to the HeartMath Institute, what they found is heart-brain coherence gives you the most power over others. Now, others, meaning an actual conscious human being, I would add on to that, not being a study, just myself knowing what I know. My interpretation, I'll say it that way, my interpretation of this is that yes, heart-brain coherence is important, just like the study proved. Also, they came up with a new term, which is really just a term now, and that term is psychophysiological coherence. So psychology, psyche, which is mental thoughts and emotions, physiology which is the body, psychophysiological coherence. Coherence meaning alignment. Those with the most psychophysiological coherence have the most impact and the most ability to influence the psychology, the mindset, the emotional state of others. Which is another reason why it's super important to have ourself in alignment. Are we acting in alignment to our understanding of what is best for us? Are we acting with our physiology in alignment with what we feel in our heart? The more in alignment we are, the more impact we have in reality as a whole, not just other people, because this whole reality is also an energetic field. Now, when it comes to science, you really only can make statements based on what is proven in the study, and studies prove very superficial, surface level things. However, as a person, we can look at these studies or stories of these studies, and we can make inferences, and we can interpret based on our own knowledge what is shown to us and integrate that into our being. And for me, something like what we're talking about now is very important for us to manage our memories, our emotional states, and our alignment. Alignment is super important. If we're doing something every single day that is not in alignment with what we feel to be the greatest version of ourselves, we're broken. And when we're broken, we're out of alignment. Other people's who are in more alignment will influence you. Now, on a positive aspect, you experience this. Just to give you some, quote, proof of this, you experience this when you go to a concert or you go to a sporting event and you're watching players who are in complete alignment. Their mind, their heart, and their body is 100% focused on getting the ball in the hoop, or getting the ball in the net, or playing the symphony of music. And you and everybody in there is attuned to the person on the stage or the field, because they are in most alignment. You're giving yourself up to their field because they're more in alignment than you are, and or you temporarily give them permission to do so. This also happens when somebody walks into the room who's pissed off. They're 100% pissed off. They're pissed off in their mind, they're pissed off in their heart, they're pissed off in their body. And you can feel it. And if you are not in alignment, if you do not have your toroidal field intact and in alignment, it's going through your heart, through your brain and mind, through it, out into other dimensions of you, into your past, into your future, and then back in and up through your body. If that is broken, then you're going to be very influenced by the angry person. So that was a very long answer to how to stop others' emotional states from impacting you. And fascia is one of the things. So back to what I was saying about the study and how the body ties into that, and even the gut. These are things that are yet to be studied in a mainstream manner. But what we're going to start to recognize is that the body is the brain, and that the DNA is the antenna. And our physical body itself, that means that our entire physical body is the antenna for us, for our perception of reality. Now, we wouldn't make the mistake of thinking that the radio has the people inside of it, right? We know that the radio is tuned to a signal that is also sending a signal to all of the other radios who are tuned. Well, it's sending a signal to all the other radios. The radios that are expressing that signal are tuned to that frequency. And so there's a certain percentage of all of the radios that are within the reach of that signal that are expressing that signal. That's us. So we are like a radio that's tuned energetically to a piece of the signal. And that signal is permeating. The signal is the universe, or from a religious verbiage point, it's God. God is making up all things, and we will be tuned to a certain aspect of that, right? God is omnipresent, omnipotent, omniscient. It means all powerful, all spaces, and all knowing. That's the translation. That essentially means that energy is the same thing. It's everywhere. It cannot be created or destroyed. It's in everything. It always has existed. It always will exist. And we're expressing, like a radio, the frequency that we are. And there's multiple of us who are expressing that same frequency. And that's where you get into things. Like if you get into the Seth material, if you want to get into that, the books are Seth Speaks. And the second one I would recommend is called, it's the book that comes after that, On the Nature of Personal Reality. And there's a good explanation of how the signal gets expressed into multiple bodies through multiple timelines. And then there's an oversoul, like a soul that is kind of like the regional manager of all of the different bodies, who's experiencing all of the different bodies at once. And once again, this is just information for us to integrate, because there isn't one truth. This is what was sold to us and programmed to us in school, that there's one right answer. Just integrate everything. We don't watch a fiction movie and have to question whether it was true or not. We just accept it, and we can integrate that lesson. So when somebody speaks to you, it doesn't matter if what they're speaking to you is true or not. It just doesn't. Guys, can you learn from fiction or not? Yes or no? If you can, then you can learn from every scenario, whether it's true or not, whether the person's lying or not. You can learn from it. Take that if someone says waterfalls are, anyways, I don't want to make up something random, but you can take something from everything. Someone asked, what about change? I don't know what that means. So that was a pretty good talk. Let's bring it home and let me try to encompass the whole thing. So this is like a summary of what we spoke about. So first started talking about going outside, then we moved into fully expressing the body. We went into the wrists and some exercises with that. You guys can watch the replay if you haven't seen that. And so that's just full expression of the body. Then somebody asked me about my why, and I was talking about recognizing the internal environment as being one with the external environment. And that is really what this whole thing was about, is recognizing that the impingements and the restrictions that we're experiencing within self is going to be completely reflected into our life experience. And so as we work on ourself and start to expand our awareness and focus and abilities, just like imagination of that apple, our ability to imagine scenarios while we're even in a scenario. So now we're walking up to our car every single day, and instead of noticing just like the paint flicking off of it and the rust and the tires that are worn down, we're seeing that, but we're also feeling and seeing the gratefulness that we have a vehicle that can transport us 100 miles in an hour. And I can be in a completely different city in a few minutes because of this vehicle. And so now we're able to recognize and relate to multiple dimensions of reality, and we don't always have to just live in the reality where our car is a rust bucket piece of crap. We actually can step into multiple versions of that, and the more we do that, the more that we are able to choose which versions of reality are the most satisfactory to us. And when we do that, we pinpoint, we grab onto, we put ourselves in tension with that version of reality, and we grab onto that intention with our mental state, our emotional state. We will then start acting with our physical body in alignment to the reality of our choosing, which is then going to reflect out into how reality forms around us, because we now have a standard, a value, an intention that we have chosen. And now everything that we go through is going to be filtered from that lens, which is then going to allow us to be more creative from that lens. We're going to be thinking from that lens. We're going to be coming up with solutions from that lens. We're going to be looking at our challenges from this lens, not from where we once were. And we start to release the things that we don't see exist here. And that can be actions, that can be waking up late, that can be watching Netflix, that can be hanging out with the friends that are fun, but really they require us to go drinking 5 times a week. And we start to see, compare and contrast the differences between the two realities. And we're so much in tension with this reality starts to overtake us. And then we look back 6 months, 1 year, 2 years later, and we're like, oh my gosh, I remember when I was thinking how much I liked this reality over this reality. And we can actually see that we created it. And then we can repeat that process until we get better and better and better. And we start to learn, and we start to learn, and we start to learn. And that's the beautiful cycle of life. I'll leave you guys with that. Take care.